we'll just get going. If anyone shows up and we've already started, that's their loss. So I made this wicked presentation, and Gannon doesn't like it.
Too small.
I'll let you guys be the judge of it. So it looks like an Android phone, of course, fitting. So welcome to Winnipeg Android. This is our 10th event, which is kind of cool. I was hoping to have some snazzy shirts made, but they told me that it wasn't going to happen in time. So next time, come for some t-shirts. So mention our sponsors. Red River gave us this lovely room. We have New Media Manitoba, which is helping us out with some t-shirts and all that stuff. My company, Bidspace Development, and Bold Apps, which is just outside of the city. So if you don't know them, they're in Eldershane, Manitoba. Tonight I'm going to talk about Cordova development, plugins, how to run your app, and emulating Android on the computer. And Gannon's going to talk about JavaScript Cordova testing. And if you didn't know, we have a website, winnipegandroid.ca, and I'm sure you found our Twitter handle. It's just @WinnipegAndroid. So that's it. Did you guys like the presentation?
That was amazing.
I know.
Breathtaking. That's pretty short. I might need a minute before you continue.
We're not here to look at sluts.
I can.
Sorry?
I cannot speak about me.
You can talk.
I know I'm new still.
Yeah, we'll have some time after the presentations where if anyone wants to talk, they'll have a moment to speak. We'll have an open forum, round table sort of thing. All right, where am I? You'd think I was prepared, but I'm not. All right, so Cordova is pretty sweet. So has anyone actually spent some time playing with it other than just a couple example things?
A little bit, not really.
A little bit. So I built a few apps using it. I really like it. It's funny because with the user group here, you have kind of a split. You either really like it and are interested in it, or you hate it. And you hate it because hybrid applications and HTML5 is the devil, and it's all about native applications, so you have to write in Java, and if you're writing for iOS, you have to write in Objective-C or Swift. I'm the complete opposite. I'm all about open source, which I think also translates into the fact that I'm also about like cross-platform and all that fun stuff, so I like Cordova. And I like the fact that it allows me to develop one app, even if it's not like your final version of the app, but it allows you to create that MVP and rapidly deploy to different platforms. So you can build your app and deploy it to Android, you can deploy it to iOS. You get to target platforms that you might not have the time or money to spend on. So if you have your dev team working, they can build one app and all of a sudden you can target Firefox OS and Ubuntu Touch, which you probably have not worked with. It's a relatively simple structure. So this is the app that we're going to build tonight. I'm going to start from the beginning, but this is what you'll get if you pull the repo from GitHub right now. And that's just github.com/WinnipegAndroid. So that's in the Cordova example. So if you pull this repo, you will end up with an app, and you have just a basic structure of folders here. So you've got hooks, platforms, plugins, and www. In addition to that, you have config.xml. In your hooks, that's where you're going to create any Angular or Node hooks that you can pull in things like uglify.js. So if you're going to minify all your CSS and JavaScript, I'm not really going to touch on that right now, but of course, if you have humongous files, you can uglify them, so that way you can't, or minify, or whatever you want to call it, to make it run slightly more efficiently. Your platforms is where your actual builds end up. So I have two builds in here right now. One's Android and one's for the browser. So since it's an HTML5 app, you can run it on a web browser. Plugins is where any Cordova plugins run. So a plugin is the piece that allows you to interact with the native components of the phone. So if you're writing an HTML5 JavaScript app, you somehow have to hook into the APIs on the phone to be able to interact with like the camera, return your pictures and stuff like that. So I'm using the camera, the contacts, and the geolocation APIs right now. each of the platforms ends up with a JSON file, and the JSON file just basically tells it what features it needs and where to find all the plugins and all that. And that's all generated for you. So when you add a platform and a plugin, Cordova is smart enough to link up, these are the plugins that are available for this platform. And some plugins won't be available for every platform. For example, the battery monitor doesn't always work with Firefox OS. So it'll gracefully fail. So if you try to run it, it'll just not include the plugin. Each of the plugins is generally full of native code. So inside of the plugin, you have your tests, your www, your doc, and your source. If you look in the source, you'll see that there's an Android, BlackBerry, browser, Firefox OS, iOS, Ubuntu, everything. So inside of the Android folder, if you guys can see that, there's a bunch of .java files. If you look at Firefox OS, it's just a JavaScript file. So each of these is just the code to actually interact with those, and this is all again just generated. So unless you're creating your own plugins, you don't have to do anything. It's just made for you. All of your code resides inside of www, so you're going to hit it just like you would hit a web page. You have an index.html. You're basically wrapping your app in a thin web server, and the phone runs it and renders everything just like a web page. So you have the ability to make a very ugly app or a very nice looking app, but at that point you're just basically doing web development. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be comfortable saying that almost everyone here knows some HTML and some CSS. You can look into certain things like CSS frameworks. There's Junior CSS I've got included in here. I'm not really using it, but it basically is just a framework for making your app look more like an app. I'm a big fan of Ionic, so Ionic framework builds off of Cordova and it incorporates AngularJS, so I like AngularJS a lot as well. And when you use Ionic, you're using AngularJS, it has a CSS framework, and it has Cordova all built in. And the plugins are basically the same, so you're not going to run into too many dependency issues with that. The structure of your folder is just going to be like any website. So you see I've got a CSS folder, an image, and a JS folder. That's where I'm putting my CSS, my images, and my JavaScript files, and then everything gets called through your index. When you build your platform, so I've got Android and browser. If you're looking at the browser, you'll notice it's just a web page. So you hit index, it has your config, it has all your plugins and everything. If you look at the Android though, which is up here, it actually builds an Android app. One thing to note though is it still builds the Android app in the Eclipse style folder structure. So if you try to open up the app in Android Studio, it'll ask you to generate a Android Studio app. So it generally is seamless, but every time you rebuild, you're going to have to redo that. When you build and deploy your Cordova apps, you're doing it pretty much from the command line. Unless you're doing iOS, then you have to deploy through Xcode. But you end up with an actual app, so you'll end up with all your drawable folders, everything you'd expect in an Android app. So it builds the whole app, and everything ends up inside of your www folder in there. And you don't have to muck around with anything in here either. When you build it, it'll handle putting everything in there for you. So getting started with it is relatively simple. Let's get our stuff going here. So it's generally a command line tool. There are tools that will build for you. I know you can, there's a plugin for Visual Studio that will handle creating projects and all that for you. I don't use Visual Studio all that much. I tend to be a Linux user. You can also do it from Android Studio as well, but I'm pretty much command line and lightweight editors. So I'll just start by creating one. So you're going to have Cordova installed. Cordova uses Node.js and NPM to handle building itself and building up all your stuff. So to do that, once you have NPM and Node.js installed, you can install Cordova easily. I've already got it installed, but I'll show you the command. So the npm install sg Cordova. And so what that does is it just installs Cordova globally on your system. I already have it, so I'm just going to create a new one. So to create a new project, I'll go Cordova create a new project, and I'll call it Winnipeg Android. Come and then I will call it Winnipeg Android. So, creating a new Cordova project with the name Winnipeg Android, and the ID of the app that gets used in the App Store is com.winnipeg android.example app. And then it tells me, if I don't click out of it, that where it is located. So it's in my development directory under Winnipeg Android / Winnipeg Android. So if I switch into there, and I do a listing, you'll see I have my hooks, my platforms, my plugins, and my www folder. And I'll just go ahead and open up index, or insert the config. So here we are. This is the config file. Adam would be nicer if it opened it up in two separate projects or two separate things, but my new app, the config file is kind of like your global app config. In here, when you build your app, the Cordova runtime will actually read this XML file, and that's what it uses to build your native apps. So it'll look and see the name Winnipeg Android, the description, whatever you want to name it. So, you know, just say Android. So that would be Winnipeg Android user group would be the description of the app in the various stores. You can set your author email, so mine would be dan@bitspacedevelopment.com, and my URL and the name of the team, and then it tells you where you want your source to start. So you don't have to have it start on index. It's generally accepted by the community to leave it as that. I've never run into a situation where I wanted to change that. Your config file though can get quite huge, so this is a very basic config here. When you start adding things like your icons and all that kind of stuff, it ends up getting quite long. It's XML, so you just got to keep it nicely formed, and Cordova won't complain. I'll just go ahead and open this client. Excuse me for one moment. Do you guys read the darker code or the lighter code better? Or does it just suck either way?
It's about the same.
Okay, then I won't bother changing it. So right now the way it stands is I have no plugins, no platforms, the hooks file is just empty. I'm not going to do anything with hooks today. I have one JavaScript file, an image, some CSS, and an index file. So to add a platform, I'm just going to go Cordova platform, add Android. Clearly that's adding the Android platform. So now under platforms I've got Android. I have an emulator running. I'm sorry about it, but it's the original, the stock Android emulator. Usually I use Genymotion, but it decided to bar from me before this event, so I'm using the stock Android emulator. Now I can run this, so to build your platform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the app up with just the default what you get when you start a new app. So all of your commands start with Cordova. We'll platform build Android, and it'll spew out a bunch of stuff. Build Android. So it runs a bunch of stuff. You can't really tell what it's doing. It's basically just grabbing all your assets, moving it, and outputting a bunch of stuff. Sometimes it'll fail. It can often fail when you have your Android SDK not set up properly in your path. It'll basically get to the end and it'll be like, I don't know what to do. And it'll just sit there. So I got a build successful. It took 20 seconds, and it tells you where the APKs are, but I'm just going to go Cordova emulate Android. And you have two options here. You can run or you can emulate. If you run it, it will look at ADB and look for attached devices. And you can specify which device it'll run. Otherwise, it'll default to the top one that's default on ADB. If you're running the Dann Motion emulator though, it runs with its own instance of ADB. So if you're running Cordova and you're looking to run on the Dann Motion emulator, you actually have to hit run, but also on the Dann Motion emulator tell it to use your Android SDK version of ADB as opposed to its own. So you got this like weird, it's an emulator but it thinks it's a device. Since I'm using the actual emulator I'm running here. And you can't really see, but this little guy here that's turned green. The emulator doesn't want to scale nicely, but basically what it's doing is it's looking on start. So I have here just a hello world title, my H1 Apache Cordova. You'll see Apache Cordova right here. I have an ID called device ready, and then I have two paragraph elements. One listening, connecting to the device, and one device is ready. And I've included Cordova.js and index.js. So when you look at the index JavaScript file, which is in here, it has an app, so var app. I'm just binding an event. And basically all I'm doing is on, once the device is ready, so all it's listening for is on the device triggering on ready. So I've bound the events device listener, device ready. When it's ready, all I do is spit out whether or not it's connected or not. So it starts out by saying connect to device. Once it's connected, it says connected. Relatively simple, but I'm going to add some more interesting stuff. So
right now that green thing that's blinking,
that's
device
yeah.
ready? What does it say?
So it says device ready. You can't really see on the projector, but it's just kind of flashing. It says device ready. So what that means is that it's listened for the window, like the window event saying like the whole thing is ready, which is triggered by the phone. And that's how it knows that it's ready to go. So it's not super interesting, but I will add a camera now. So I'm going to talk about camera is the most interesting and most standard plugin that people tend to want to work with. So I have Cordova, Cordova plugin. So to add plugins, it's just as you would expect, Cordova plugin add, and Cordova plugin. That'll work first try. Cool. So under my plugins now, I have the camera plugin, which I showed just a minute ago, and under my JSON file, I now have in my config file, I'll add the camera and the permissions necessary for Android to allow me to use a camera. And in the true nature of being completely lazy, I have a camera.js file, which is ready to go. So underneath my JavaScript folder, I'll create a new file, and we'll just call it camera.js. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding a device listener just on ready. I have a picture source and a destination type added at the top. And this is just a default example. So when the device is ready, I'm able to get the navigator. So Cordova always talks with the navigator, which is like the device, like the window manager itself. About camera, so I have a camera plugin now. So the camera API is able to communicate back with the native code and create an object that I can actually work with. So what I'm basically doing is I'm coming down here to capture the photo, and I'm just saying get picture, and then I have a success, a fail, and then I'm saying I want quality of 50, and the destination type is data URL. You can have data URL or file URI, and the only real difference is one's a URL to another device, and the other is like a base64 encoded image, which is exactly not what it says it's doing. Then I get the photo. So on photo success, I'm calling